Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second session of American English Live, Series 22. My name is Dr. Darling Wiggins Dockery, and I will be your host today, along with my moderator behind the scenes, Alexis, who will be helping to answer your questions in the chat and responding to your comments. We wanted to let you know that today's session will be recorded and shared across various platforms. By attending and adding your comments to the chat or comments feature during today's webinar, your name, your country, and or comment may be included in the video recording. By participating, you consent to your comments being shared in the recording and its use for purposes related to the work of FHI 360 and the U.S. Department of State. If you do not want to appear in the recording, please do not share any comments in the chat or the comments feature during the webinar. Throughout Series 22, we will explore a variety of strategies for fostering student motivation and engagement in the English language classroom. We hope you'll be able to use the practical ideas that we share. So here's what you can expect today. The session is about 60 minutes long. The presenter will present the material, and I, as your host, will ask questions and comment as well. But we really want to hear from you, our audience, so that we can address your experiences and share your ideas. So please share your thoughts in the comments feature or the chat box. At the end of today's webinar, there will be a short attendance quiz available for the chance to earn a digital badge. We'll share more details about the quiz and the badge at the end of the session. Now for today's webinar, Artful Engagement, Crafting Motivation and Engagement in the Classroom. This webinar will explore how integrating the arts can transform language learning by fostering motivation, creativity, and active participation. Participants will discover how arts-based strategies such as visual arts, music, drama, and creative writing can make language lessons more engaging, relevant, and connected to the real world. We'll examine a range of arts-based strategies that can be adapted for learners of all ages and language levels. Additionally, we will look at practical examples of creative arts-based activities that encourage personal expression, boost confidence, and engage students from various backgrounds. By the end of the webinar, participants will gain ready-to-use tools and techniques to motivate students and transform their classroom experience through the power of the arts. And we are pleased to introduce our presenter, Lena Shaqareq. Lena embodies the journey of an English language learner. Born and raised in Qatar, she moved to the United States at 15 and has since become a seasoned TESOL professional with over 15 years of experience. She holds an MA in adult education with a TESOL concentration and a certificate in cross-cultural management. Lena teaches TESOL courses at the University of North Florida and ESL classes at the State College. She has worked as a virtual educator in Mauritania, Ethiopia, Tunisia, and Turkey. Served as a teacher's corner guest expert, authored several books, and contributed to various TESOL boards, including serving as president of Northeast Florida TESOL. Through Lena Institute, she offers occupational English courses and services. Her passion for education drives her to share her knowledge and to pursue professional development. Welcome, Lena.
Thank you so much, Darlene, for the introduction. Good morning or afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining from wherever you are across the globe. I hope you are ready to dive into a colorful and creative discussion about a topic that combines both my passions, teaching English and the arts. So let's begin by looking at the goals for this session. By the end of this webinar, you will gain insight into the role of the arts in fostering student motivation and engagement, creative strategies to implement that integrate arts into your teaching practices, ways to adapt and scaffold arts-based activities to support learners of various proficiencies, and effective approaches for enhancing student motivation and engagement in lessons through various art-based activities and artistic expressions. But before we get into it, let's start with you. Let us know in the chat, how often do you incorporate art forms into your lessons? And if you've never used the arts, that's also perfectly okay. I hope you are inspired by the end of this webinar to do so.
Okay, so we want to hear from you right here from the beginning. How often do you incorporate art forms into your lessons? Okay, so let's see what our responses are to our first question. Um, well, uh, Lena, so far we have never. Depends on the student level. Not very often. Oh, a lot of nevers and not very often. I rarely incorporate them into my lessons. And so, wait, we have an every day as a warm up as well. So, a little variety there in our responses, occasionally and another always. So, back to you, Lena.
All right, so that's normal. I think it depends on the situation and the teacher, and hopefully this will inspire you to participate more in the arts and in the future. So moving on, as educators, we know that motivation is a key ingredient in any successful classroom, and the arts have a special way of unlocking it. When students create, perform, and express themselves artistically, they're not just learning a language, they're living it. It becomes an active process. So, in order for us to understand its role, let's take a quick look at what the arts are. When we think of the arts, we tend to think of more of the common forms such as painting, music, and drama. That's what we usually go to. But the arts can encompass a lot more than that. You have the visual arts that include things such as painting, drawing, sculpting, photography, digital art, graphic design, even architecture, video production, and animation are some forms. If we look at performing arts, then we can include things such as music, dance, theater, opera, circus performances, puppetry, and improvisations. And then you have literary arts such as poetry, fiction, nonfiction, drama, playwriting, storytelling, all go under that category. And then you have so many other art forms such as fashion design, culinary arts, floral design, interior design, landscape design, game design, which is very common these days, ceramics, and any sort of crafting can go under this category as well. So with such a wide array of excuse me, art forms at our disposal, integrating the arts into your language lessons can have many key benefits. Let's take a look at some of them. Integrating the arts has the ability to enhance language skills like vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and fluency. From singing songs to writing scripts to reflecting on paintings and so much more, it generates interaction with the language and production of language. All this interaction with the arts allows students to practice their language and learn new language skills at the same time. Integrating the arts can also boost engagement and motivation. Well, let's face it, if done correctly, it's just more fun than learning a boring grammar rule and then completing a worksheet to go along with it. The arts allow them to demonstrate their learning in a fun and creative way that's less intimidating. Research has also shown us that integrating the arts into learning enhances memory and retention of information learned. Interacting with the arts tends to be an active process and allows for multisensory engagement. And many times it allows for repetition and reinforcement, which are two key factors, important factors for retention. Using the arts can also create an emotional connection with the content, which makes it more likely for your students to remember it. You can also use the arts to encourage critical thinking skills. Integrating the arts often requires students to think outside the box and reflect. Analyzing a piece of artwork, for instance, allows for multiple perspectives. They must consider context, emotions, symbolism, which requires a different set of language skills and a different set of critical thinking skills. And last but not least, it helps lower the students' affective filters. And what do I mean by affective filters? That's the emotional barriers such as anxiety that can hinder students' engagement and learning. So when we lower the students' affective filter, in turn, it builds their confidence in communication skills. Art activities tend to be less rigid and more fun, therefore they feel less threatening and intimidating for the students. So we've seen how integrating the arts can be very beneficial in many ways and can support learning. But of course, like most teaching strategies, it can come with some challenges. So I'd like to hear from you. What are some challenges you have faced or possibly anticipate facing when using the arts in your classroom? Let us know in the chat.
Okay, so we're really looking forward to your comments. Some of you have told me in person when we talked about games and other activities that you face challenges. So let's hear what challenges you face or may anticipate facing when trying to integrate the arts in your classroom. Let's see. From Nora, she said it can be time consuming. Anna said time constraints. Makari said lack of materials. And while some other responses are coming in, Lena, I wanted to share this comment with you. It said, it really helps my artistic students. They feel like they're finally putting their skills into practice in the class. And that comment came from Betty. Um,
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I'm saying that's for sure. That's a very good point. You're allowing your students to excel in something they're good at and to shine.
Indeed. We have a few more challenges. Abdel says time management. Many times using arts in the classroom is too time consuming. Again, we have another comment about time. Limited time is what another one of our teachers said. And Samir said lack of time for applying these arts. Melanie also um, expressed a concern about the inability to interpret a work of art. And Shazia said classroom management, especially with younger children. So those are some of the responses we've received from our participants. Back to you, Lena.
And those are all valid concerns and challenges, and we're going to actually address some of them in our next slide. So let's take a closer look at some of the most common challenges that teachers face when trying to integrate the arts into their lessons. The first one that came up a lot, apparently, was time constraints. And so let's face it, teachers have a lot on their plate. We know that. And they feel the pressure of covering required content, meeting curriculum goals, and preparing students for tests. Building lesson plans is time consuming as is, and to have to add another piece can feel very daunting for them. The time needed to think about the right art form, introduce them to students, and allow for engagement may feel like an added piece an added burden that's not necessary. A second challenge was the lack of resources. And this can be a real issue for many schools lacking funding for the necessary resources. Budget limitations hinder access to art supplies and resources, which can be a significant barrier. A third common challenge is actually curriculum and lesson alignment. One of the most critical challenges is ensuring that the arts are actually aligned with the existing curriculum and learning objectives. Teachers are always having to connect the dots between content and activities that this might feel like another unnecessary dot to try to plug in and connect. A fourth challenge is your student readiness. So we know that each student is different in their own way. And this is also true for the readiness towards arts-based activities. Some students are very comfortable and love to be creative. They might always have been exposed to it, while others might feel intimidated, unsure, or just don't know what to do with it. So you might face resistance from them in the classroom, and that would be totally normal. So with that said, what can teachers do? Let's look at some simple solutions to those common challenges. Some of them we've discussed when we talked about the challenge in the past, but here's a few more. Time constraints, let's look at those. One solution would be to shorten the activity. Art doesn't always have to be a big, elaborate, time-consuming project. A quick sketch, perhaps, or a story, of a story or a 5-minute song activity can have powerful impacts on learning. You can also collaborate with other teachers, maybe co-plan or co-teach a lesson that will save time. And maybe they would even have some great ideas and activities for you to use, so you don't have to spend time thinking of them. And of course, there's always AI tools these days, if they are accessible to you. AI can help with lesson planning and with generating ideas for you and connecting them. Now let's talk about the lack of resources, which comes up a lot. The good news with this is that you don't really need fancy materials to incorporate the arts. You can repurpose everyday items like cardboard, plastic lids, toilet paper rolls, and even dried and cleaned eggshells, which I've done myself when I was young, and it still sticks with me because it was just that much fun to do. You can also collaborate with your community members and stakeholders. Your parents, local artists, and nearby businesses might be willing to donate materials or their time for your classes. Another big challenge was aligning the art activity with the curriculum and lesson. And aligning the main objective, sorry, aligning your lesson, right, is a challenge in itself because you want to think about integrating them into existing lessons and not creating new lessons. That would be more time consuming. So aligning your activity with the main objective of the lesson is crucial for maintaining relevance and ensuring that the art project provided directly supports the intended learning outcome. We don't want to give them an art activity just because it is fun. We don't want to create something new just because it's fun. If it doesn't tie into the lesson, then there will be missed learning opportunities, and it will just be a waste of time for both you, the teacher, and the students. But adapting to the lesson will also ensure that you reach all your teaching goals without taking away time from doing so. And consider also starting with the goal in mind, your end goal for the lesson, and then add the appropriate art form and activity that will support that goal. And finally, there's a challenge of student readiness, which is very real. And this is important. It's important to adapt the activities to your students' needs and interests. You want to also provide scaffolding and tiered tasks so it's not overwhelming for them. Collaborative projects are also an excellent way to help with that. For those students who are intimidated by the arts, it helps alleviate the pressure as they know they won't be on their own when they're doing it. They can also be inspired by other members in their group, gain different perspectives, and of course, when we're talking language learning, it generates a lot of language as they collaborate. So it's beneficial in so many ways to put them in groups. Another solution for this would be to model the activity. Demonstrating the process, skill, or the art activity you're giving them will give students a clear example to follow. Maybe even save some of the artwork if possible to use as examples for future lessons. When the students have a clear understanding of the expectations, they will be more at ease with the art project. So here are some examples of ways to incorporate the arts into your existing lesson. Let's assume you are focusing on grammar. Perhaps an activity could be to make a recipe and then write out imperative directions to go along with it. If your focus is on vocabulary development, perhaps students can express new words through drawing or movement. If you are targeting speaking skills, then perhaps a role play of a dialogue or act out a story would be appropriate here. In terms of writing skills, you can have your students write a story based on provided images you give them, and they can get as creative as they want with it. And if you want to check for reading comprehension, students can create a video of a story they read, and that way they can kind of summarize it and make sure they understand the concepts and the main idea of this story. All right, so back to you. Before we get into implementation strategies for the arts, let's have your thoughts on it. What are some ways you can adapt your lessons to include the arts?
Now, Lena, I'm sure that the examples you gave just generated so many ideas among our participants. So tell us, what are some of the ways you can adapt your lessons to include the arts? Now that you know you don't have to start from scratch, you can adapt your lessons. So let's see what some of your ideas are. Okay. So while we wait for the ideas to come in, I do have a couple of comments for you, Lena. Um, Kazran said, integrating the arts is different from our normal way of instruction. So the instructor also needs motivation first. So hopefully this course or this webinar session is giving some of that motivation.
Exactly.
Rodriguez said, can we use this method with Montessori level students?
Of course, with any
Okay.
student.
And then, please pardon me for butchering your name, Evgenia said, and what about shy students who naturally don't like to perform?
Oh, we're going to touch up on that actually when we talk about strategies. So there's lots of strategies to engage shy students as well. So we'll touch up on a lot of that.
Okay, well, we've got quite a few responses now to some ways that our participants plan to adapt their lessons to include the arts. We heard from Noha, who said, I sometimes ask my students to write a short story in the past simple tense. So we have that language point, grammar point, as well as the literary arts. Selma said, storytelling, drawing, and role play. Then we heard from Santi, who said, can use art to present new vocabulary. Norma said, some examples are songs in English and dance. Rabia plans to do a collage, storytelling, role play, expose the story through visual art. So these are some other ways. Rosetta said, I would give a topic to write about along with an image. Favinia said, maybe considering the lesson structure, using the wrap up strategically for using art. And then Jessam said visiting museums and book fairs. Farhan said songs with subtitles. And Jack Tone said when doing grammar, you can incorporate dramatization of the words. So those are some of the responses we have.
Those
Back to
are
you.
excellent ideas. And one thing that just actually came to mind that I want to mention, because I know visiting museums is an excellent way, but I know not everybody has access to that. But if you do have access to the internet, there are virtual tours of museums now that students can participate in as well. So you can bring the museum into the classroom if going there is not an option.
I love what technology allows us to do when it works
Absolutely.
right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We know how that goes. All
Okay,
right.
back to you.
So let's look at some general strategies for effective implementation of the arts. Some we've already discussed, and here's some more. Start small. That's one of the first things I want to talk about. As we've mentioned before, many students might be intimidated by the arts. They might be shy, like you've mentioned, because they've either never been exposed to it or they think they're not good at it. So it's important to begin with simple tasks, simple role playing, maybe even creating a poster or sketch to lower the anxiety and build their confidence first. Think of it as easing them into it. We don't want to scare them away. Another strategy would be to provide guided practice. You want to offer structured opportunities for students to practice with support, ensuring that they grasp the key concepts. This could mean working through examples together as a class, uh, providing step by step instructions, or using prompts and questions to guide students through the task as they progress. And you also want to encourage student reflection. When I say reflection, I don't mean students reflecting on an art piece. I'm actually talking about students pausing and thinking critically about what they've learned, how they've approached the task, and what strategies worked or didn't work for them.
Mhm.
There is no right or wrong, good or bad in this case. It's just the process that allows them to adjust and grow. This encourages self awareness and metacognition, two important factors for learning as well. You can perhaps encourage reflection by having them write summaries of what they've learned about themselves in the art project. Or you can give them guided questions to answer, such as what did I like? What was the most challenging? How did I like working with this art form? Something to kind of prompt them. All right, now that we've discussed some strategies for incorporating the arts to motivate and engage your students, you know what's even more powerful is allowing them the option to choose their art form and to be themselves. When students have a say in how they express themselves, their engagement and confidence can skyrocket. So here's some ways where you can achieve that. You want to start by first discovering their artistic strength, of course. That way you can use that to your advantage and their advantage, really, when planning your lessons. Find out what art forms they like, how well they work with the different forms, and what interests them. You want to also allow them to make choices as to what art form they would like to use or how to express themselves. Perhaps allow multiple options for each lesson or activity that they can choose from. So, designing flexible activities then becomes important and will allow you to give them this autonomy we're talking about. And of course, you want to leverage their skills to design lessons that can really engage them and appeal to their interests and reach all the students. So let's continue the rest of the webinar by looking at some practical and creative ideas to integrate the arts into our lessons to enhance student motivation and engagement. All right, here's one that I like. You can implement this activity at the beginning of the year as you get to know who your students are. I call it the heart of me. And it's simple. We all tend to do introduction and get to know me activities at the beginning of the school year. It's important to know who our students are. And this activity allows you to do so while also learning about their artistic abilities and strength as well. Basically, you invite students to use any creative medium they feel comfortable with to introduce themselves and things related to them. By doing so, you give them that choice, the autonomy we talked about earlier. They can perhaps choose to create a collage to represent who they are, or write a song and perform it. Maybe they can make a short video about who they are, write a poem or a comic strip, Or perhaps they can perform an interpretive dance that represents things about them. Or they can build something physical like a sculpture or a diorama. So there are several things you can do to facilitate this activity for your students. First, you want to provide them with options to choose from. Some students might know exactly which art form they want to use and what they'd like to work with, but others might need that extra inspiration. So giving those options will help kind of get them going. You want to provide clear directions of what you are looking for in this introduction. Perhaps what pieces of information, how long, and anything else you would like to include. Provide them with an example. We already talked about how modeling and examples are powerful and gives kind of a clear idea of what the expectations are. You want to give them time, of course, to brainstorm and to create this, but also equally important, you want to give them time to practice introducing themselves. And when it comes to the introductions, maybe start with small groups in case they are intimidated to do it in front of a large class. And you gauge your classroom. Perhaps they are comfortable in a whole class setting. Here's an example of this activity using a diorama. In Katrina's diorama, she put pictures of a computer and cell phone on the left side because she uses them every day for work. She also added images of a bus because she takes the bus to English class as well as to work when the weather is bad. Katrina also included some of her interests and hobbies like books, coffee, cooking, and outdoor activities. Finally, she used images of the beach because she and her son love going to the beach together and they are planning a special beach trip in the summer. All right, so we mentioned before that it's important to model the activity and provide guidance. When it comes to implementing the Heart of Me activity, what creative medium would you, as a teacher, use to introduce yourself to your class as a model?
Okay, so that's really exciting. I loved Katrina's example that integrated so many facets of who she was in that one presentation. So let's see what sorts of art creative mediums would our participants use to introduce themselves. As those responses are coming in, I do have a couple of questions for you, Lena. One is from Hebert, who says, can we consider art something that students draw on a piece of paper related to a topic we're teaching?
Of course, drawing is one of the basic forms of arts and, something that children grow up doing before we even teach them how to do.
Mhm. Okay, so we also have a comment from Rosetta who said, I find that creative masterpiece of one's individuality of choice works perfectly. Everyone is blessed in their own way. Hence, imaginary examples come in many different ways. Thank you for that comment, Rosetta.
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely a good point.
Then we have Nan who said, choices foster students' interest. And Miriam said, I'm really enjoying this webinar. So those are
Good to know.
some comments. And now we have some responses to the question, what creative medium would you use to introduce yourself to your class? So from Kazran, we have from Parisa to everyone in an outline. Then we have a response from Selma, who said, send them a letter. Haniel said, a fancy Canva presentation. Oh, and Canva just released some new things we can put in that fancy
Yeah.
presentation. Manuel said, creating infographics and mind maps. Shazia said, painting with acrylics on a canvas. So we have some really artistic teacher participants, don't we, in this group?
I see that.
Hmm. Then we have Abdel, who said, I would use a video showing places that are important for me as I explain why they are so. From Amanda, we have the comment, I would use a short video with photos, music, and voiceover to introduce myself. It's fun, it's visual, and helps my class learn about me in a creative way.
Absolutely.
Manuel said, maybe I could sing a song talking about me. And then Rosie said, I would introduce myself by drawing myself on the blackboard. Also, using a collage as Katrina's example. So, those are some responses we received from our participants. All very exciting. I wish I could be a, what did they say? Not a fly on the wall, something like a ladybug on the wall, so I could see all of these implemented
Yeah.
in participants'
Yeah.
classrooms.
A very diverse taste, and we have here of teachers doing all kinds of different art forms in their classrooms. So let's continue. And I want to share with you another practical tip that would work for any teacher, any classroom, and any language proficiency level. And that's providing students with an art menu. And it's exactly as it sounds. It's a menu of different art ideas that students can choose from and get inspired by. You can even have students add to it throughout the year, and you'll have it from year to year to use over and over. And remember the Heart of Me activity to introduce themselves? Well, if they're stuck on ideas of what to do, then they can resort to the art menu for inspiration. So here's a simplified version of what it can look like. And you can design your art menu however way you want. But let's assume you organize it according to the alphabetically. So an example of that would be, let's say under A's, you can have activities listed such as acted out and album cover design. Under B, you can have build a sculpture, possibly book trailer video. C can include create a comic strip or choreograph a short dance. D can be design a logo or draw a character. E can include activities like edit a photo creatively, express with emojis, F can include fashion sketch, found poetry with using cutout words, and you get the idea and you keep going all the way and you keep adding to that. You can also organize your art menu according to the art form, perhaps visual arts under one section, performing arts under another. So however you feel comfortable doing that, but you want to provide them a layout where they can just go in and choose something they can be inspired by. All right, let's look at an example lesson. Let's assume you are doing a lesson on descriptive vocabulary and adjectives, and you want to check for understanding, make sure your students understand this concept, and you want to use art. Students can then go to the art menu and find things such as draw a picture of your dream house or favorite place and describe it. Or perhaps create a collage of your favorite season and describe that. Perhaps they can write a poem about their favorite place or person, or they can take a picture, photography, of anything and then write a description of it. Okay, so back to you to get your creative ideas. What's the topic or goal of an upcoming lesson where you can try the art menu approach? Let us know.
Okay, let us know. What's the topic or goal of an upcoming lesson where you could try the art menu approach? And as Lena said, there are many ways that that art menu can be set up. So let's see how you all would set up that art menu. While we're waiting for responses, Lena, we have Janet who says, nice art menu. I love it. There are two exclamation points behind that. And then
Awesome.
we have Lorena, who has a question. When you use flashcards, is it also art?
You can add art to it. Perhaps they can draw pictures. If the flashcards, for example, are for vocabulary, they can have the word, have the definition on the other side, and draw a little sketch that represents the word. Or you can combine it with something like, if it's a word they have to define, they can act it out as they practice with those flashcards. But flashcards themselves might not be so artistic, but you can add a little touch to it.
Okay, thank you. Um, Now we have some responses to our question, what's the topic or goal of an upcoming lesson where you could try the art menu approach? So Marco said, free choose dishes, ideas, and logo creation. Faiza said an oral presentation, which will be communication skills and literary studies. So those are some upcoming lessons that this can be integrated into. Um, we have a response that says sports. Another says transportation is the topic. And then Hebert said to create a company logo. That's a very specific kind of artistic challenge. Then from Amanda, we have I'll use the art menu approach in a lesson about emotions. Students can choose to draw, act, or write a poem to show how they feel and why. And then Rabia said, make puppet art with available material for exposing my thoughts. Rabia said, make puppet art. I'm sorry, I just read that. Thank you for that response, Rabia. I must have really liked it. I'm about to read it twice. The next response that I will share with you is from Christian, who said, for my personality discussion lesson, I would ask them to create a collage of likes and dislikes to show graphics of their personality traits. Another one of our teachers said, I'm going to teach grammar of present perfect, and the vocabulary is about tools. So I asked them to bring some tools, some toy tools in a toolbox, and they can say their names in English. And then another one of our teachers said, my upcoming lesson is about medicine. As a way to incorporate arts into this class, I can ask my students to make a role play between a doctor and a patient. So that would be acting. So those are some very interesting and exciting ways that our participants plan to integrate the art menu into their upcoming lessons. Back to you, Lena.
Yeah, some excellent ideas. And heard a lot that are actually authentic and real world, which is very important to also think about including in the classroom. All right, so continuing on with practical ideas. Just like a great playlist, your classroom will benefit from a variety of art forms, and creating a weekly routine can ensure you do so. Here are some of the benefits of varying the art forms in your classrooms. First, it helps reach all your learners, so no one's left behind. It actually stimulates different parts of the brain, making learning more effective. It also appeals to the various learning preferences, which increases student engagement and in turn enhances learning. It also helps students gain confidence in the various art forms. Routines will provide structure and consistency, which can help students feel secure and confident. And as we mentioned before, this is part of lowering their affective filters. Knowing what to expect reduces anxiety and allows students to even prepare themselves ahead of time, especially for those students who might be intimidated and shy with the arts. Here's an example of a weekly routine that can be changed up monthly to include other art forms. This routine works for any class or grade level because the scaffolding or accommodations will happen within the activity itself. This just provides a general structure of which art form will be focused on for that day. So, for example, Monday can be dedicated to anything related to visual arts. So they can describe a painting or they can paint something themselves. Tuesday might be dedicated to music, perhaps writing a song or analyzing a song's lyrics. Wednesday can be dedicated to drama, and that can include things like role playing a scene. Thursday can be dedicated to movement, such as interpretive dance. Friday can be allocated to literary arts, and they can write a poem in future tense, for example. And perhaps maybe you do this routine for a month, and then the next month you change up the art forms for each day. You do that for another month. And that way you ensure that you vary the art forms while providing the students kind of a heads up of what to expect each day. Okay, so I've shared lots of ideas and strategies with you. Let's hear from you again. If you had to teach tomorrow using only what's in your desk and a spark of creativity, perhaps some of the ideas we shared, what arts-based activity would you try with what learning objectives?
Okay, so a two-part question here. Number one, what arts-based activity could you try tomorrow using only the materials you have in your desk right now? And what learning objective would it support? What arts-based activity could you try tomorrow using only what's in your desk? And what learning activity would it support? So can't wait to see your responses to that. And while we're waiting for them to come in, Lena,
Mhm.
we have a question. What's the best way to assess students' artistic responses fairly?
Oh, that comes up a lot, and I probably should have put something in the PowerPoint on that. But the idea here is not to assess the art itself and their artistic ability. You're still assessing language and their understanding and whether they are applying language correctly. The art is just a means to it. So if you're assessing their art, it might intimidate them more. So maybe you want to shy away from assessing the art itself, maybe just based on completion. Did they do it? And did they apply it correctly to the our language proficiency that you're looking for?
Thank you. That was a really good question. We have another question from Sergey, um, who says, with young learners, how can we use these arts in the classroom during reading and writing lessons, especially if the very young students cannot yet read or write?
Well, a lot of young students still love song and dance. I mean, we're born to sing and dance before we even can talk sometimes. And so you can still incorporate songs to get them engaged, dance, movement, right? Even doodling, even if they can't draw very well, just get their creative minds going. Give them colors, give them something simple to start with.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for that question. We have some responses to the question here. If you had to teach tomorrow using only what's in your desk and a spark of creativity, what would you try and what's the learning objective? Sandra said role play to demonstrate listening and reading comprehension, drawing idioms I teach that day. Abdel says writing a story out of a sequence of AI generated images. And the topic would be simple past tense. Maritari, pardon me if I butchered your name, said making a mini book involving drawing and writing. Selma said future tense. We will draw a picture of a future man. Rabia said, make flashcards for teaching them what kind of blessings they have. So develop gratitude among them. Mercedes said, a song in which we can use vocabulary that we're learning. Marie said, drawing a picture of a dream house. So those are some responses to what our teachers would do with what they have right now in their desk. Back to you.
Those are all excellent responses. And I'm telling you, I'm kind of gaining some ideas myself that I might not have thought about in the past. All right, so before we end our webinar, I wanted to share with you some more low prep practical ideas on how to apply the arts into your lessons. Some examples could be using old magazines or books and black markers to create blackout poetry. Students can illustrate a comic strip from a story they read, focusing perhaps on the main ideas. You can use recycled materials to create a structure, and then students can write a poem to describe it. Think about creating origami and have students then write out the steps to it. You can create, or students can create an interpretive dance or movement to go along with a poem, and then write about the emotions it evokes. You can have a grammar hunt where students can hunt for specific items in a song's lyrics, perhaps have them look for adjectives or compound sentences or complex sentences. You can ask students to change certain grammar functions in the song and then sing it the new way. And then one of my favorites that I actually use with my college students is play a silent clip from a movie and then put students in groups to create a skit to go along with the scene. And then they can act it out, do the voiceover as you play the silent clip in the background. And it just creates very creative ideas because you'll see how each group has a different story completely from the same scene. So it creates a lot of language learning as well. All right, so as we wrap up, let's reflect on everything we learned. Share with us in the chat what's one small step you can take to bring the arts into your classroom to motivate your students.
Okay, so with each of our webinars, we want you to leave with something you can implement tomorrow or today if you have classes later today. And so tell us, what's that one small thing you can do to bring the arts into your classroom to motivate your students? We are looking forward to these responses. We've had so many exciting responses so far to each of your questions, Lena. Um, Makes me want to go back in the classroom and try some of them. So let's see what our participants are saying they plan to do. This one small step, it doesn't have to be something that's overwhelming or big. It can just be one way that you plan to implement some of what you have learned today. And we're hearing from Janet. Janet says, silent clip from the movie. That got 3 exclamation points, Lena. And it
It's a
says,
fun one.
it looks like sounds like a fun one. And such a nice option, Janice goes on to say, thanks. Samir said, voiceover idea is exciting. So that's a hit. That one is a hit. Bring colored markers to every class is something one of our teachers plans to try right away. Anna says, provide some materials and allow some choice for students to develop their skills. And Mayorboy says, I can incorporate short, creative drawing prompts related to language concepts to spark student engagement and make abstract ideas more tangible. So those are some things that our teachers plan to do right away based on some of what you have shared with us here today, Lena. Back
Oh,
to
I'm
you.
so excited. Yeah, I'm so excited to hear that they are inspired and ready to roll with some of the ideas from this webinar. So this wraps it up. Thank you so much for attending the webinar, and I do hope you have gained some helpful strategies. It seems like you have. Hopefully you can take a lot more back into your classrooms and you can implement them right away. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you so much for your time, Lena, and for these wonderful arts-based activities for incorporating and boosting student confidence and motivation. We also want to thank you, our participants, for your engagement with us today and your participation.